Eu vou chutar sua bunda até a morte. Volta correndo pra sua mamãe.
Oh, would you look at that? It's about time for my annual Katarina is actually really cool video. I had a different concept for today. I've done a video in the past called something like the final verdict on Gigas, because what I really want to do right now is have a look back at the new original character designs in Tekken 7 now that we have their final versions, and talk about what their impact has been, their legacy, the journey that they've been on throughout the lifespan of this game. Some of these characters will be classic parts of the franchise forever, and some of them will disappear with this entry, never to be heard from again, other than when people say, hey, do you guys remember Katarina? And more than half the community answers, Kata who? So I wanted to rate the new designs in 3 different categories, and I made these slides. I was going to talk about visual presentation, gameplay design, and then balance. I wanted it to have a bit of a nuance. It's not enough to say that Leroy is a giant game-ruining turd, because it doesn't explain that there are amazing parts of that design that I definitely think that we should salvage, right? So I prepared 7 slides for the original characters and then 7 more for the DLC and guest characters, and I was going to make that into 2 videos. But when I started recording, I realized that I had completely forgotten Katarina, and this is despite the fact that I'd gone through the roster several times. I made lists of all the characters I had to talk about, but I just didn't notice her, I think because she's become that forgettable. And it's especially amazing because I used to main this character. It's a long time ago in an arcade far, far away, but Katarina barely seems to exist anymore. I haven't played against a Katarina in, I think, several weeks. She seems to be about as obscure these days as Bears or Elisa, at least where I play. So instead of creating the video I was going to create, I thought, screw it, I'm just going to go into the game and start playing a lot of Katarina and see how I feel. The only time I've brought her up in a video recently is when I made a list of the weakest characters in the game, and I put her at the very bottom alongside Yoshimitsu. My personal opinion is that they are the 2 weakest characters in the game. Might be controversial, but I think most people agree that those 2 characters are very weak in this game, which obviously doesn't have anything to do with how much you like them. Yoshimitsu is considered a classic and is loved by many players, but nobody likes Katarina. So I started playing a bunch of matches, and guess what? I had a lot of fun, and it sort of reignited my appreciation and love for this design. I think Western audiences made up their minds about Katarina before she was even available on home consoles. You know, back in those days, there was this strong sentiment that Namco were trying to casualize the game so that they could sell it to more new players. A lot of people still believe that. It's probably true, but you look at the original designs that were coming out back then, and they all seemed extremely basic. So it was like, okay, us legacy players coming from Tekken Tag 2, we're used to this hyper movement focused game. We know all these, technical things, and that's intimidating for new players. So Namco are going to make these very basic, very powerful characters that they can enjoy so that they have a chance to compete with people who have more experience. And I think people forget, for example, that Shaheen was like quadruple S tier back in those days when he could still do his cartwheel ender into while standing 3. On Forgotten Realm, for example, he was insanely strong. So you have these blunt instrument characters coming out. They all have hop kicks. They don't wave dash. They don't have any complex movement, right? And out of all of them, out of that lineup, I think Katarina was considered the most stupid, the most basic, and the most friendly for casuals, because she had this reputation of being the character you can play by pressing the same button over and over. So the meme for all these years has been 4-4-4-4-4. She now has 3-3-3-3-3 as well, but I think a lot of people forget about her standard combo back then, which was the back 1 combo or the handshake combo. So back 1 is like a basic mid poke that you don't use. You kind of use it these days. It's safe. It has some good extensions, but it's not a huge part of her game plan really. But back then you could launch the opponent and then do, because it had a huge step So you could do back one, back one, back one, back one, back one, and then spin, and then do a couple more back ones, and that was like your entire combo, right? So you had one button for the combo, and then you had this insanely powerful Magic 4 that had great range, it was safe, and you could keep pressing the 4 button and get almost an entire combo worth of damage without having to worry about spin or anything else. And then you couple that with two big, juicy, fat lows in the shape of one of the most damaging Snake Edges ever and her down back 3, and I think people just started to consider Katarina almost insultingly simple. So you end up with a character that has a reputation for basically being designed specifically for bad players, and that is something that's going to scare a lot of Tekken players off. You know, there's a lot of elitism in this community when it comes to what characters you're supposed to be playing or what difficult execution actually looks like, and it's not something I worry about much. It's a concept that I love to goof on, but even I eventually moved on from Katarina to slightly more interesting and complex characters. But the point is this: she gained this horrible reputation early on for being a cheesy boob monster that you only play if you suck at the game, and she's never been able to shake it. So what I want to do right now is have an honest look at what's left of Katarina. Now that we have the final version, I want to ask the question, is it still true, or is there more to her? I think the general direction that Namco have taken with Katarina over the years has been to attempt to reduce the frustration she causes by sucking out more and more of the cheese, but then compensating her by giving her more and more damage, specifically in her combos. And so Katarina has ended up with some of the most powerful combo game in the entire roster. And it's interesting because if you want to find some of the few characters that still do very shitty combo damage in late season 4, you can look at the other Tekken 7 originals. You know, characters like Claudio, Josie, Kazumi. They barely get 60 when Katarina is partying with, 70 to 75 off of a standard launch. At the wall, she's really high power as well. Her splatting options are pretty good, but then she has jab down forward 1-3 series for a really high damage reliable wall combo, but she can also get one of those corner slump bounce combos now with 4-4-3 into up back 4. And if you do that after a mid-screen launch that carries to the wall, it's going to be somewhere between 95 to 100 damage, and that is without the rage drive, which can obviously push that even higher. It's got insane damage at the wall, but I think this is a very unhealthy and not very balanced way of creating a character, and it doesn't make the character any better, really. And I think we have a couple of examples of that. For example, Lars has been shitty for pretty much all of Tekken 7, but all the attempts to make him more powerful have been focused around his combos, to the point where he now has Hurricane Axe, and he can basically carry wall to wall on an infinite stage and do 75 damage reliably off of a 14 frame launch, and he's still shitty. We also have Chloe, who's been bad, changed in many ways, but never really made it even into mid-tier, but she has probably some of the highest damage, especially in combos, of any character in the roster, right? And then you sort of have the inverse of that as well. If you look at characters like Feng, if you don't do like the finicky difficult combos with him, his combo damage overall can be really low, but it's a great character because the properties are good, the impact speed, the evasion, the safety, the range. So you need things like that to make a character solid, and I think making their combos super powerful is sort of a poor compensation, and it just creates a character design that doesn't feel balanced at all. So I don't think that Katarina is very good, but I honestly don't feel like she's very cheesy anymore either, at least relatively, because a lot of these famous cheesy things that she can do are either not there anymore, or you can now find much worse examples on all kinds of characters all over the roster, especially if you look at later characters and DLC. So just as an example, that famous 4-string that gave her this reputation to begin with, it's been nerfed to where the combo is weaker and it's now unsafe on block, and that's despite the fact that a lot of characters still have extremely fast and powerful counter hit tools in Magic 4s. Her down back 3 still gives guaranteed up back 4 at the wall, and that gives you a powerful mix-up at the wall, but it's 24 frames to impact, launch punishable, and then you can look at things like Oscar's down 1+2 into guaranteed Demon Slayer, and not only is that 4 frames faster to impact and almost impossible to react to online, it also works in the open as long as you're close to the opponent and you don't need the wall, right? And you can sort of play that game with yourself and try and find things that still stand out as being super cheesy or genuinely good, and there isn't that much. Now, the other big problem with Katarina has been that she struggles with real mix-ups because her lows are either extremely weak or way too big and powerful and slow and launch punishable. So you can sort of play against her reliably by stand blocking a whole lot. And if you look at newer characters in Tekken, direction the game has taken is powerful hell sweeps, powerful falling leaves that mean that the character can stand next to you and still threaten you with mix-ups because an unseeable knockdown low could happen at any moment, and that's true for Leroy, it's true for Lydia, but they also have these stances that they can go into, and then they have a pretty standardized toolkit from that stance, counter hit tools, lows, homing moves, and so on. Katarina's Harrier stance is actually really weak for the most part, and they try to make it better by giving it a mix-up low, which is the new Harrier down forward 3, but it's on the slow side, it can be selected against, and it just doesn't really do the job that it needed to. So really the best mix-up that you have right now is to go into full crouch and do full crouch down forward 4, but you don't have amazing options to mix that with, and it is launch punishable, and just start looking at some other full crouch mix-up games in the game, Julia, Kunimitsu, and so on, and she really just pales by comparison and ends up looking really quite weak. So how do you play this character these days? How do you make her tick now that they've taken away the range on your hop kick, taken away your -1 down forward 1, and given it to Leroy? Your lows are too risky, your gap closers are too linear, and your stand sucks. Well, it turns out that Katarina still retains a really solid package of just standard Tekken tools. I think the jab string is pretty good, the down forward one still works, you have some fast half shitty low pokes, and above average movement, and if you rely on that and make good decisions, if you can create opportunities like sidestep a hop kick, then she does okay, and then you just have to occasionally throw something a little bit bigger and a little bit more bunga and capitalize on that giant damage when you're able to get it. It's just interesting to me how a character that has had a reputation for almost a decade for being too easy and too cheesy has to rely on classic good Tekken decision making in order to do well, and that is why my thesis statement with this video is going to be that Katarina is by a margin a more difficult character to play than Brian Fury.
Bye guys, see you in battle.